I'm Isaac from Spain. I'm engineer and I used to be Catholic. Have you ever believed in God and why?
Ever believed in God?
Yeah.
So that's a commonly asked question. I mean, not just of me, but people ask, do you, the universal you, believe in God? And it's not an unambiguous question because there's many different concepts of God, from the Buddhist God as a force of love and creativity and beauty, to various conceptions of God as a person with whom you make covenants, and in some traditions gets angry if you don't live up to your covenants, and there's many different concepts. Historians who've studied the Old Testament, the Christian Old Testament, believe it was written by at least 3 different groups of rabbis who had different views of God, one of which is actually kind of Buddhist-like, and another which is the God that people are familiar with from Christian traditions as kind of a person that you make covenants with. So I believe that the ultimate spiritual value is consciousness. Now, in some spiritual traditions, it's called a soul, and I think that's what people mean by a soul, is an entity that's conscious. So a person is not just something like a module to build a house. It's sacred because it's a conscious person. And then we debate, who and what is conscious. Are animals conscious? And that's at the root of the animal rights movement. And we will have debates about whether or not an AI is conscious. And there's already a lot of discussion about that idea. So that's the ultimate spiritual concept. And so you might think there's a big distinction or disparity between atheists who don't believe in God and people who have more traditional religious beliefs. But actually, there isn't. Everyone, with very few outliers, believes in the sacredness of a conscious person. And in fact, non-conscious things like a machine or a diamond are only important insofar as they affect the conscious experience of conscious beings. And, atheists would agree that a conscious person is sacred. They may not use that word exactly, but our morality is based on consciousness and the impact that different acts and actions and lack of action have on conscious experience. And so to extinguish someone's consciousness is a high crime morally, and our legal system is loosely based on our morality, so it's a high crime legally. Causing pain and suffering, like assaulting someone, is also a crime, maybe not as serious as extinguishing someone's consciousness, but that's also immoral. If I destroy my property, that's probably okay. If I destroy your property, that's not okay, but not because I'm causing pain and suffering to the property, because I'm causing pain and suffering to the owner. So basically, our morality is based on consciousness. And some scientists say, well, consciousness is not really a scientific property. There's no falsifiable experiment you can run that would definitively prove that this entity is conscious and this one isn't. There's no machine you could build. You slide an entity in and the green light goes on if it's conscious and a red light goes on if it's not. You could build a machine like that, but it would have philosophical assumptions built into it. So John Searle at Berkeley would want to make sure it's squirting biological neurotransmitters, and if it wasn't, the red light would go on. And Dan Dennett at Tufts, who's a leading AI philosopher, would want to make sure that the entity had some model of its own thinking process, and that would be, if it did that, then maybe the green light would go on and it would say it's conscious. But fundamentally, there's no scientific experiment that doesn't have philosophical assumptions about the nature of consciousness that can determine it. So some scientists say, well, it's just an illusion. We shouldn't waste time with it. But that's not my view because, as I say, morality is based on consciousness, and even people who say that nonetheless actually believe in that morality, even though they would say that there's no such thing as consciousness. they actually do believe in consciousness and the sacredness of it. So that's one view I have. So we have consciousness. It's deeply mysterious. I mean, how is it that we can look at a human brain, and I've certainly been among those that have attempted to describe how it's like a machine and how that machine works. And yes, it's extremely complicated, but nonetheless, each neocortical module is made up of 100 neurons, and each neuron has these different parts and ion channels, and you can describe how it goes and follows the laws of physics. So it is a machine. There's nothing mystical about a neuron. And out of that comes a conscious entity. It's kind of a miracle. So I do believe in miracles, and I think that's a spiritual property. And the fact that consciousness came into being is a deeply mysterious spiritual kind of revelation. So that's one attitude I have towards spirituality. Another one is, how is God described in these different traditions? There's actually a common set of attributes that God has in all of these different religious traditions. God is infinitely creative and beautiful and loving, intelligent. So what happens to entities as they evolve? First through biological evolution, and I've said that technological evolution is just a continuation of biological evolution. It actually is a very smooth transition in terms of the acceleration of paradigm shift rates. Well, they become more intelligent, clearly. I mean, humans, and now humans enhanced with technology, which we already are more intelligent than worms, which are more intelligent than single-celled animals. So as we evolved, we became more intelligent. We became more capable of higher-level emotions, so we became more loving. We became more creative. We became more beautiful. And so we're actually moving exponentially to have greater levels of the very properties we ascribe to God without limit. Now, we never become literally infinite, but we're moving exponentially in that direction, so we become more godlike, and we become closer to God, and we do so at an exponential rate, and exponentials kind of explode, never quite becoming infinite, so we never really reach that ideal, but you can definitely say that evolution is a spiritual process that moves us closer to God. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my view of spirituality.